Well, hello everyone. It's just coming up to 6 o'clock in the UK, which means we can start our session today. So welcome to today's webinar on Project Basics Part 2. Now, as it says on the tin, this is a follow-up session to Project Basics Part 1. So I'm going to assume that the majority of people that we have on the call today, and it is quite a small niche group, I'm going to assume that you all attended that session that we did back in September. And we are going to pick up from where we left off in that session. Now, if you do happen to be on the call today and you didn't come to that webinar, then don't worry too much. You will still be able to follow along, but just bear in mind that we have done a little bit of work on the project file already. Now, if you do want to go back and review that webinar, then you can access it on the Simon Says It YouTube channel. And I'm going to get Adam to drop the file we're using, or the files, I should say, in the session today into the chat panel. So if Adam could do that for me right now, that would be great. I have the lovely Adam, as always, on the call with me today.
Hello, everyone. Yes, they are being dropped in right now. They're just being uploaded, so they should be with you any second.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So if you do want to follow along in the session today, or even if you just want to save those files off and rerun through this webinar along with the recording that you'll receive after the session, then those files are really going to help you with that. So as always, just a very quick introduction to me. I'm not going to ramble on about myself for hours and hours. So my name is Deborah Ashby and I'm a freelance IT trainer. And it's my job basically to design, deliver and facilitate Microsoft training courses. So that's both online and in the classroom. So without further ado, let's take a look at what we're going to be covering in the session today. Oh, actually, first, before we do that, we'll move on to some housekeeping. I always forget about this slide. If you are on the call, if you can just jump into the chat panel and just type in there, let us know where you're from. Let everybody else know where you're from as well. And obviously make sure that you can see our screen. I know sometimes when we run these sessions, there is a small little bit of lag. So I will try and go a little bit slower just to make sure that you are all in time with me. And as always, with questions, we are taking questions. So if you have any questions related to the webinar, you can drop those into the chat panel. And the lovely Adam is there to answer any questions that you have related to that. If you've got any project-specific questions, even though I'm sure Adam's knowledge in project is amazing, he may not be able to answer your questions. So you can leave those for me, and I'll leave some time at the end for any questions related to project. And as I mentioned, there will be a recording emailed to you afterwards. All right, so now that housekeeping is over, we can move on to what we're going to be covering today. So we're going to start out with just a little bit of a review or a recap of Project Basics Part 1. And we're just going to very briefly recap some of the things that we did. And you will notice that the spreadsheet that I'm loading up first is a little bit more full or complete than where we left off. But I was just utilizing things that we did in that first session. So I just want to explain the spreadsheet to you first of all. We're then going to move into setting constraints and deadlines. We're going to talk about how you can set milestones in your project. I'm going to show you how you can create different phases for a project. And then we're going to move on to something that's really important in project, and that is setting up resources or creating a resource sheet. So I'm going to show you how to create the resource sheet, add your resources, and then add those or assign those resources to your tasks. We're going to talk a little bit about setting up costs for tasks. And I'm also going to talk to you right at the end a little bit about setting a baseline. And as we go through this, I'm going to throw in a couple of other things. So we will briefly delve into the world of reports. Now, as always, we only have an hour. Project is such a huge, complex product that I would say to you that if this gives you a little bit of a taster, I would advise you to access those courses that you do have access to as members. So we have Project Beginners course, and we also have a Project Advanced course. And we have those in, and Adam may be able to help me there, 2019, 2016, 2013. I'm not sure if we have 2010 on there. Do we have 2010, Adam? I can't remember.
Yes, we do. We have 2010 as well for anyone in that version.
Wonderful. All right, so great. So that's what we're going to go through today. Now, we're going to start out with a recap of Project Basics Part 1. And if you remember, we were talking about, or we were putting together a plan for a wedding. And again, this is just a demo file or plan. You may want to relate it more to the kinds of things that you do at work. So it might be a project, an IT project or marketing project or whatever it is that you do. But ours was related to a wedding plan. So let's jump back into Project. And I am going to bring up what we were working on in the previous session. Now, if you remember, what we did in the previous session was we explained what project is and why it's useful, why you might want to use it. And we also started to create an outline for this wedding plan. So we added some top-level summary tasks, and you can see those here. They're the ones in bold, so planning, attire, guests, so on and so forth. We added some subtasks, which are these ones underneath, which are slightly indented, and we saw how to create that structure in that first session. We took a look at the task properties, so when you double click on a task, it gives you more information. And we also had a quick look at Gantt chart view, which you can see here. So this is the visual representation of all of those tasks. We looked at how you can modify the start and end dates of an entire project. And you can see at the top here in task 0, I have my start and finish date. So at the moment, the way that my project is, it currently starts on September the 26th, 2019 and ends on February the 5th, 2020. And we also looked at, and this was the last thing we looked at, how to create dependencies for tasks and how to work with lag. So just as a quick reminder, in this predecessors column that you can see just here, this is where we have any task dependencies. So again, just as a quick reminder, if you look at this here, so task 8, for example, task 8 has a dependency of task 7, and you can see that listed in the predecessors column. So really, we need to order the wedding dress before we go into the measurements and fitting. And as you can see in this predecessors column, as we scroll down, we have lots of different predecessors that we added. So we discussed those finish to start dates, start to start, and how we can add any lag in there. So this one here, for example, send out invitations. This is dependent on task 12 finishing, which is the make guest list task. It has a start to start finish, which means that send out invitations can start when make guest list starts. And there is a 5-day lag in there, which means we're going to wait 5 days before that task starts. So that's kind of where we got up to in the previous session. Now, you will see that this is slightly different to the file that we left in that last session. And all I've really done in this file is I've added in a few more dependencies throughout this project plan. Now, something that I haven't done is a lot of these dates and timings are still not completely accurate, but we are going to deal with a few of those in this session today as well. Now, the first thing I want to start out talking about is constraints and deadlines. And to do that, we're going to add in a few more dependencies so you can see how those work yet again. Now, constraints and deadlines tend to give you a little bit more control as to when things are happening in your project. And as I said, if you look at the project currently, a lot of the work that we're doing is kind of all squashed up towards the beginning of the project. So I can see that kind of in the Gantt chart. We're very heavy at the front here, but as I scroll through, the tasks tend to tail off a little bit as we move through the project. So I'm probably going to want to take a look at those and maybe spread them out a little bit more. Now, one thing that's really important to do is to identify key decisions in your project right at the beginning. So for example, in this wedding project, if I scroll down right to the bottom and look at the wedding day. So currently, based on everything that comes before it in this project, and again, remember, not all of these dates are set in stone at the moment. Currently, my wedding day is due to take place on October the 7th, 2019. But if I look just 2 tasks up, you can see here, book wedding venue is due to start on October the 17th. Now that doesn't quite make sense because we can't really have the wedding day before we've booked the wedding venue. So there's obviously a few little tweaks that I need to do in here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to say that 2 key things must happen before we set the wedding date. And that is, I must book the reception venue and also book the wedding venue. Okay, so this is kind of a recap of linking tasks together and also creating dependencies. So what I'm going to do is if I scroll up to the top here, you can see I have the task set wedding date. Now, this is going to rely on task 18, so booking the reception venue, and also task 38, booking the wedding venue. So I want to say that before we can set the wedding date, we need to have made those 2 key decisions. So in this predecessors column, what I'm going to do is I am going to type in 18 for task 18, comma 38. So task 18 and task 38 must happen before we can set the wedding date. Okay, and click away. And you can now see on the Gantt chart that updates just there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to link together the set wedding date task and also the send out invitations task, because send out invitations can't happen until we've set the wedding date. So I'm going to link these 2 tasks together. And if you remember from before when we did this, if we jump up to the task ribbon, in this schedule group, we have a link button. It looks like a little chain link. So I'm just going to link those 2 together. And you can now see that send out invitations in the predecessors column now has a 3 on the end to tell me that that's linked to task 3. So that's kind of a little bit more of a recap on just linking and setting predecessors. So now that we've done that, we are in a little bit more of a realistic position as to when we're going to send out those invitations. Now, there are still a couple of things in this project plan which need dependencies. So, for example, if I scroll to something like this, plan and finalize seating arrangements, this is going to need to rely on task 14, so finalizing the guest list. So until I know who's coming, I can't really plan and finalize those seating arrangements. Okay, so I'm going to select finalize guest list. Sorry, I'm going to select plan and finalize seating arrangements, and it's going to have a predecessor of task 14, again, which I'm just going to type in to that predecessors column. Okay, so we've set up a few more things in there. Again, we covered that in that first session. Let's move on now to talking about constraints. Now, to demonstrate this, I'm just going to insert a new blank task above this planning task. So I'm going to highlight planning. I'm going to right-click my mouse, and we have in there an insert task option. So let's insert that task. And what you'll see here is that if you look in the start date for this task, by default, it's going to insert any new tasks at the project start date. And if you want to check what your project start date is, if you go to the Project tab, you'll see underneath Project Information, you can click in there, and you can see there what your project start date is and also what the current date is. The finish date is also listed there. It's kind of grayed out because the finish date is very much controlled with what you have set up in your project plan. So this is probably going to change as we start to add more tasks, as we start to edit our durations. And you can see that everything currently is scheduled from the project start date. So with that in mind, I'm going to double click on this new task to go into the task information. And I'm going to jump across to that advanced tab. Now, what you'll see in here is that for this task, we have constraint types, and you can set constraints on any task that you have or any task that you add. Now, by default, you'll find that it will default to as soon as possible. So when scheduling from a start date, the default will be as soon as possible. And generally, this is the one that you're going to want to use because normally we're trying to get this project completed as soon as possible. You will see in there, if you click the drop down, you have a number of different options. I'm going to utilize one of these in an example in a moment. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these. What I'll do is leave you a little bit of kind of homework, I guess, for that. If you want to find out more about constraint types and using them in project, you can jump into the help file. So if you just type in constraints, go into project help, and you can read through what each of those mean. But I will say that the most common one is as soon as possible. We're going to use one of these in a moment. So hopefully that all makes sense. Now, as I said, jump into the help section to read about those. But the one example I will show you, a different way that you can use this, is let's suppose that one of our bridesmaids is working overseas. And she's not going to be available for the select and order bridesmaid dresses task until the beginning of January. So if I cancel out of here and find my select and order bridesmaids task, okay, so currently that's scheduled to start on November the 14th. Now, one of our bridesmaids isn't going to be around until January. So essentially, this task can't start until the 1st of January, or shall we say the 2nd of January. I don't think anyone wants to select bridesmaids dresses on New Year's Day. So what we might do here is jump into this task by double clicking it, go to our advanced tab, and we might set a constraint here. So if we click the drop down, and I might say start no earlier than, and then in the constraint date, I can then select the date where I want this task to start. So I might say January the 2nd. Okay. Now you'll see when I click on OK, that's going to have quite an impact on this project. So now there's a bit of a delay on this task. So it doesn't start now until January the 2nd, and it runs all the way through to March the 25th. So just bear in mind that when you are adding in constraints, they can have quite a heavy impact on the overall scheduling of your project. So because that's been pushed back by about 6 weeks or so, it's going to push my entire project finish date back that same amount of time. Okay, so just be aware of that when you're going through this. Hopefully that all makes sense to everyone. Now, what you can also do here is if I jump back into that task, if you do add something like a constraint, I would always recommend jumping across to this notes tab and just adding in there some information about why that's been pushed back so that anybody else who's looking at this project file kind of understands what you're doing. So I might want to say something like, Jane working overseas until the 2nd of Jan, and click on OK. And you can now see in that information bar, so in the first column here where we have indicators, you can now see that that task has a little note icon there. There's also a calendar icon there, which is telling me that there is a constraint on this task. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So think about that when you're working in project as well. Now we're going to move on to talking a little bit about deadlines. And deadlines are somewhat similar to constraints in many ways, but one major difference is that a deadline is an easily visible physical marker on the Gantt chart. Now, another difference is that constraints are used in scheduling and can affect the length of an individual task and the overall project. Now, we just saw an example of that when we changed this select and order bridesmaid dresses task. It really had an effect on the finish date of that project. So in general, constraints can affect the scheduling, whereas deadlines tend to not affect the scheduling or the timing of the project. So let's take a look at a deadline in action in our project plan. Now, if possible, we would like this wedding to be at the end of summer, maybe because of the weather. We don't want it to be too hot, but we don't want it to be too cold either. So again, if I scroll down through my project plan, and go to wedding day. And let's just take a moment to review that date. So currently my wedding day is October the 7th. Now, I'm not particularly happy with that. As I said, it doesn't make too much sense considering some of the other task start dates that we have above. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a deadline on this task. So I'm going to open up wedding day. And I'm going to jump into that advanced tab again. And you can see here we have a deadline option, which currently says NA. And we have a drop down which opens up the calendar. Now I'm going to say I want this wedding to occur on September the 1st, 2020. So I'm going to scroll through my calendar until I get to that date. I'm going to select September the 1st and I'm going to click on OK. Now, I can't see that on the Gantt chart because it's so far in the future, it's kind of gone off the page. So I'm going to scroll across a little bit. And again, I still can't see it. So another little tip, another little thing you can do here if you're having trouble seeing things, if you jump up to the view ribbon, in the Zoom group, you have entire project. And if we click that, I should then be able to zoom across, and there we go. I can now see my deadline marker, and it's that little down arrow just there. If I hover my mouse over it, it's telling me that that is a deadline for this task. The deadline is September the 1st, 2020. So really what I want to make sure here is that as I'm adding tasks and setting dates, I don't really want anything to move to the right of this deadline marker. Now, if I am going through and adding things in, and it does move beyond this deadline of wedding date, then I will be notified of that. So project will pop up in this indicators column, which is this first column in our little table here. It will let me know that I've gone over my deadline date. Okay, so just be aware of that when you're adding deadlines in. Now, as I said, this is a purely visual deadline marker. It doesn't have any effect on the scheduling whatsoever. All right, let's scroll back up to the top of our project. So I'm just going to delete this new task that I added in. So I'm going to select the task, right click, and we have a delete task option in there. So very simple to get rid of any tasks that you no longer need. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit in this next section about different phases of a project. And in terms of project management, projects often have different phases. And you can see at the top here, we have planning. Then underneath that, I have agree budget and approach and also set wedding date. Now, in general, we would want to agree the budget and approach first before doing anything else in this project. So there's going to be a lot of decisions that need to be made before we can do anything else. So for example, I need to work out how much money we're going to spend on this project, or this wedding in this case. I need to think about if it's going to be a small wedding, maybe a small intimate affair, or maybe a much grander occasion with hundreds and hundreds of guests. So this task, task 2, is probably going to be a precursor to everything else in this schedule. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rearrange my project just so it's a little bit easier to read, a little bit easier to see. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this top level planning task. I'm going to get rid of that. Actually, before I do that, and this is an important point actually, if you try and delete this as it is, you're going to get this little planning wizard error, and you might see this pop up from time to time. Now, it's telling me that planning is a summary task, which it is, and it says deleting it will delete all of its subtasks as well. So just be aware of that. If you do try to delete a top level summary task and you click OK here, it's going to delete all of the subtasks. Now, in this case, I don't want to do that. I just literally want to delete that planning task. So I'm going to cancel. And what I need to do is I need to select the 2 tasks below, and I need to just outdent them because currently they're indented, which means they're subtasks of planning. So I'm going to go to my task ribbon. And again, in the schedule group, you can see I have my outdent task and indent task. So I'm going to outdent both of those. which means that they're no longer subtasks. So I can now safely go in and just delete planning, because essentially now it's just a regular task. Now, what I'm going to do is, because agree budget and approach needs to be done before we do any of these other tasks, I'm going to set task number 1 as a precursor or a predecessor to all of the rest of the project. So what I might do is go to the first subtask here, the first summary task, attire, and in the predecessors column, I'm going to add the number 1. And I'm going to do that for all of these summary tasks. So just go through and add a number 1 next to all of these. Now, I will say, you can probably see I get a little drop down here. Now, I think this is new for 2019, but I will just show you, for anybody who does have a copy of 2019, you can click this drop down and it will allow you to link to any tasks you like, which is a nice little feature. But I know that most of you probably aren't using 2019, hence why I am kind of staying away from that at the moment and just adding these in. So this is basically saying that all of these are reliant on that task number 1 at the top here. All right. Now, another thing I might want to do is, everything looks a little bit squashed out. I haven't got it organized very well. So I might want to just separate out these top 2 tasks, because really these need to be done before we do anything else. And there's a handy little way of kind of doing this and arranging things in your spreadsheet. So I keep saying spreadsheet, project plan, I should say. Now, if we click on task number 1, what I might want to do is put a blank row in between this project title and this first task. And if I go up to the format ribbon, sorry, not format, I can never remember where this is, the task ribbon, and go to this task drop down in the insert group, you have an option for blank row. So that's just a nice quick way of inserting a blank row just there. And I might want to do the same just here and insert another blank row. So it really just organizes it a little bit better, allows you to separate out those top 2 tasks from the rest of the project. And we're going to come back to this in a moment, where we're going to, again, look more at how you can split this up into different phases. So we will come back to this in a moment. What I'm going to move on to talking about now is milestones. And again, milestones are used to denote significant points or events in a project. And a milestone in general has a 0 duration. So it doesn't have a 1, 2, 3 day duration. It can do, but in general, milestones are just a 0 duration marker denoting a significant point in the project. And milestones can be used for a number of different reasons, and one of them being that if you need to provide management or maybe key stakeholders with a snapshot of the project, you might want to pull off a milestone report which will show them high-level progress, how you're moving through the project. Milestones can also, or might also, be associated with payment schedules. So, for example, we might have a milestone of when we need to pay the photographer or the venue. So we're going to add some milestones into this project. Now, as I mentioned, a milestone does have 0 duration, so it is assumed that there is no work associated with the milestone. So for something like set wedding date, which we have at the top here, this would be more of a milestone as opposed to an actual task. But I have 1 day duration assigned to set wedding date. So I don't really want to go into this task and set it as a milestone, because it's going to take that duration down to 0. Now, if you are happy with that task being a 0 duration, then that's fine to do it that way. But what I might be more inclined to do is to add another task which says wedding date set and use that as my milestone instead. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the blank row below. I'm going to right click and I'm going to insert a new task. And I'm going to call this wedding date set. So I'm going to go up to my entry bar at the top here, and we're going to type in, wedding date set. And I can click on my tick, or I can click on enter in order to set that. So this task is going to be my milestone, essentially. Okay, it's a statement of something that's happened rather than something that's happening. So to set this as a milestone, all I need to do is double click on it. And again, in this advanced tab, there's a couple of different ways that you can set a task as a milestone. So at the bottom there, I have a mark task as milestone option. Now, if I was to use this will allow me to keep the duration of the task. So as I said, a milestone doesn't necessarily always have to have 0 duration. If you want to mark something as a milestone which has a 20-day duration, you would come in here and you would use this option because it doesn't change the duration of the task. However, if you do just want it as a milestone, so something that has no duration, the best way to set it as a milestone is to set this duration down to 0 days. So you can see duration in the top corner here, and I've just used that roller to put it down to 0 days. And when I click on OK, and we need to scroll along a little bit, she says, where is my milestone marker gone? Let me go back into there. Sorry, it should bring up let me mark it as a milestone just here as well, just to see. There we go. For some reason, I don't know why it didn't. Normally when you set it down to 0, it will put the milestone marker in, but I've had to click that milestone checkbox as well, it seems. So there we go. That's what I was looking for. This little diamond icon just here. So that will denote any milestones that you have in your project. So now what we're going to do is, now that we've set this milestone, I'm going to link the wedding date set to the set wedding date task. Okay, so I'm going to select this task, hold down my control and select set wedding date, and I'm going to link them together. So again, up to the task tab, into the schedule group, I'm going to click our little link icon just there. Okay. So very easy to set milestones, and we are going to do a couple of other ones as well. So another thing that we might want to do is, if I scroll down to task 20, where we have book reception venue. Now, I might want to set this as a milestone. So after I've booked the reception venue, I may want to insert a task that says reception venue booked. So that's what we're going to do. Same process. I'm going to select the task below, right click, insert task. And up in our task entry bar, I'm going to say reception venue booked. Like so. And we're going to set this as a milestone. So I'm going to double click. Oops. And let's try setting that down to 0 days again. So I just see if I'm going mad or not. Let's do okay. There we go. You see, I don't know why I didn't do it on the first one, but I've just moved those days down to 0 and it's marked it as a milestone. And again, I might want to go in and link those two tasks together. So I'm going to select book reception venue booked, and then link together. Okay, and you can now see that predecessor in there, predecessor of 20. Okay, so very, very simple just to add in those milestones. Now, another milestone we might want to add in would be the wedding day task. So again, if I scroll down to wedding day, I'm going to double click. And I'm just going to mark that as a milestone as well. So I'm going to use the mark task as milestone in there and click on OK. And there we have our milestone marked. So really, really very simple. So you might find as you go through your project and you're marking various different milestones, sometimes it's quite nice to be able to see just the milestones in your project. And of course, there is a handy little utility that you can use for that. So if we jump up to the view ribbon, in this big data group, we have a little filter here. And if I click the filter drop down, there's lots of things that you can select, but one of them is milestones. So if I select that, it's just going to show me all of those milestone tasks. So sometimes if you want to get a bit of an overview, it's good to look at it in that way. I also mentioned that there are various different reports that you can run. And again, these are the kind of reports that you might want to run off each week or each month to give to your managers or key stakeholders. And there are so many different reports that you can run in Project. We're not really going to go into them in this session, but just to show you very briefly, if we jump across to the Report tab at the top here, this whole section is related to the different kinds of reports that you can run. So if we click some of the drop downs, a lot of these are probably not going to mean too much to you. And I will leave you to have a little look into this if reporting is something that you're interested in. But underneath the in progress drop down, we have a milestone report. And if I click that, it's just going to pull that information through and produce a little report for me. Now, obviously, our project isn't complete. We don't have a lot of those dates or durations set, so this looks a little bit strange, but just to give you an idea of the kinds of reports that you can pull off. So that might be something that you're interested in. Now, you can see it's opened this report, and you might be thinking, well, how do I get back to my Gantt chart view? Remember, in the bottom right-hand corner, you have your different views that you can switch between. And the first one here is Gantt chart view. So I'm going to click that icon, and that's going to take me back to my milestones. Now, if I want to clear these milestones, again, if I go back to view and go back to this filter, click the drop down, I'm just going to select no filter, and that's going to bring everything back into view. Now, another thing that we've had on the screen here the entire time we've been working, which takes up quite a bit of room, is this timeline running across the top. Now, this timeline can be really useful. And again, this isn't something we're going to look at in the session today. But at the moment, I'm not really using this. It's just kind of taking up space and getting in the way. So I might want to turn this timeline off. And helpfully, we're already on the View ribbon. In the split view group towards the end of this ribbon, you can see I currently have timeline ticked. So if I want to get rid of this timeline, I just uncheck that box and that timeline will disappear. And that just gives you a little bit more room. All right, so we're building up our project little by little. We've added some constraints, some predecessors, we've added some deadlines, we've added some milestones, and we've seen how we can run off a report and also view those milestones. One important thing about project that we haven't really touched on yet is resources. And resources is a really vital part of project. Really, tasks and resources are the building blocks you need for any project. Now, resources can take many different forms. So they might be a people resource. So that would be one that's required to do work on a particular task. So in this case of a wedding project, even though we wouldn't really consider it to be work, the bride, the groom, the bridesmaids, those would all be people resources that are required for tasks in this project. We can also add material resources. So again, in the case of this wedding, I might consider something like the wedding rings to be a material resource. If you were doing something like a building project, which kind of makes more sense, you might use materials for your building project. So bricks would be a material resource. Concrete would be a material resource. And then the final resource that you can add is a cost resource. And usually cost resources are services, so people providing services to your project. So again, for this wedding plan, a cost resource might be something like the photographer. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to set up all of the resources that are involved in this project, and then we can assign those resources to individual tasks. And some or all of those resources might have costs associated with them. So let me show you how to use the resource sheet, and we'll jump in and we'll add some resources. Now, we're currently in Gantt chart view. And again, if you cast your eyes down to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen where we have all of our different views, you'll see as I hover over them, we have task usage, team planner, and we have one that's called resource sheet. Okay, so if we click on resource sheet, you'll see that currently it's blank. We don't have any resources. Now we're going to start to add in a few into here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in our bride. So she is a resource on this project. So I'm going to type in bride. I'm going to press my tab key and it asks me to select the type of resource. So as I just discussed, 3 types of resource that you can add: work, material, or cost. Now, this is a bit misleading in this particular project because I'm going to select work for the bride, even though she's technically not doing any work on this project, as in she's not charging for her time. Again, if we were doing a different kind of project, so the example would be something like a building project, if I'd added a resource like an electrician, the type would be work, but the electrician would probably have a standard hourly rate, which I would fill in this standard rate column. He might also have an overtime rate to add in as well. So think about if there are costs attached to your resource. In this case, there isn't. She is a resource. She does need to work on the project, but she's not charging for her time. All I need to do now is I need to add in some initials. Now, the initials column is how is this resource going to appear on your Gantt chart? So when it says bride, I could have it saying bride on the Gantt chart. I might just have it saying B or some other code that I want to use. Now, in this case, I'm happy with it just saying bride. Now, a lot of these other columns have defaulted, so I'm going to keep their standard rate as 0, overtime rate as 0. Max, now this says 100%. That's what it's defaulted to, which means currently when I assign the bride as a resource, she's doing 100% of the work, which I'm happy with at the moment. Now, some of these other fields, cost per use, if there was a cost per use of the bride, then I'd put that in. That's not really related to this. The accrual method, again, if we had costs associated with this resource, we could select when we want to pay. So at the moment it says prorated, which means kind of spread throughout the life cycle of the project, or we might choose to pay at the end or pay at the start of the project. Again, this doesn't really come into play in this case because she's not charging for her time. And then the final column is just telling us which calendar that resource is using. And by default, it's set to standard, which is a standard 8-hour working day. And again, calendars is something you might want to research after this session because we're not going to have time to jump into that today. So for the bride, I don't really have to add too much information. I just want her in there as a resource. I'm going to add the groom in the same way. And he's going to be very similar. I'm going to keep him as a work resource. His initials are going to be groom. And I'm going to keep all the other columns as they are. I'm going to add another resource, but this time we're going to add the wedding rings. So I'm going to type in wedding rings. And I'm going to mark this down as a material resource. I'm going to give it the initials of rings, so that is how it's going to appear on the Gantt chart. You can see that the columns that haven't been filled out are ones that we don't need to complete for this particular resource. There's no standard rate because it's a material resource, but there is a cost per use. So there's going to be 2 rings, obviously, and each ring is going to be $500 each. Just going to say that. That's probably a little bit cheap, but we'll just put that in. $500 for each of the wedding rings. And we could choose when that is accrued. So this is probably going to be accrued towards the start of the project. Let's add one more resource in here before we start assigning them. I'm going to add the photographer. I'm going to press the tab key, and the photographer, as I mentioned, would be more of a service to this project. He's providing a service, his time, his photography skills. So we're going to set the photographer up as a cost to the project. I'm going to give him the initials of photo. And again, I might decide to come back and choose when I'm going to accrue this. It's probably going to be towards the end of the project once we've seen what those photos look like. Now, I'm not going to add a cost in for the photographer because I want to show you how you can do this at the point of adding them into the Gantt chart. So that's all I'm going to set up as my resources. And you can have loads and loads of them in here if you want to. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start adding some of these resources or assigning them to different tasks in our project. So I'm going to jump back to the Gantt chart. So again, down to the bottom corner, I'm going to click on Gantt charts to switch back to here. Now, what we're going to do is this task here, task number 2, where it says agree budget and approach. Now, currently the duration for that is 1 day. Now, I'm going to assume that it's going to take a lot longer for a couple to agree on their budget and the approach to the entire wedding. So I'm going to change the duration on this task. I'm just going to put that up to 10 days, like so. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign some resources to this task. So I'm probably going to have both the bride and the groom assigned to this task because they're both going to be involved in agreeing what their budget is and what the approach to the wedding is going to be. Now, when it comes to assigning resources, as always in Microsoft, there are a few different ways that you can do this. So the first way is if you right-click your mouse, you'll see that you have an option just here for Assign Resources. And that's going to bring up this Assign Resource box. And you can see all the resources that we added in here. So I'm going to select the bride. She's already selected. And I'm going to click on the Assign button. Now, when I do this, watch what happens to the Gantt chart. So I'm going to click Assign. And you can see she now appears assigned to this task. I'm then going to click on Groom, and I'm going to Assign. So I now have both of those resources assigned to that particular task. And I'm going to click Close. So super simple to add these people in. Now, when you do add resources, you can see here that I've actually got this little warning come up. So I've got a little green dog ear or triangle appear in the corner of that task and a little warning symbol. Now, if I click that, why that comes up is because this is one task and I've just assigned 2 resources to it. So effectively, because there's 2 people working on this task, it might take half the amount of time. So basically, project is asking me here if I want to change anything, if I want to reduce the duration but keep the same amount of work, or increase the amount of work but keep the same duration. So it gives you a choice of what you can do there. I'm just going to select this middle option. Now, just to show you kind of what's going on here, I'm going to add another column into my project plan. So I'm going to highlight the duration column. I'm going to right click and I'm going to select Insert Column. And this will allow me to select another column of information. Now, what I want to see displayed in here is the amount of work that's happening on each task. And there's so many different columns that you can have, but I know that mine's called Work, and these are all in alphabetical order. So I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. And I'm going to find the Work option. Now, what you can see here is that task, Agree Budget and Approach, is currently 160 hours of work. And the way that works that out is that it's a 10-day task. It's based on a standard working day of 8 hours, which would give us 80 hours. And we have 2 people working on the task. So that's how it comes to that total of 160 hours. So sometimes this column is really useful for working out how many hours you have on a particular task. Let's look at assigning something else or another resource to our tasks. So I'm going to scroll down to the Select and Book Photographer task. And I'm going to assign the photographer to this task. Now, again, we could right click, but another way that you can assign resources is to jump up to the resource ribbon at the top and you have an Assign Resources option. You can also see as I hover over, there is a shortcut key to bring up that box of Alt F10. And we get exactly the same box. Now, if you remember with the photographer, I didn't actually assign a cost to the photographer. But if I wanted to, I could do it at this stage. So maybe now that we've booked the photographer, he's told us how much it's going to cost. So I'm going to add in here 1,500 and I'm going to click Assign. And you can see now if I close that, we now have the photographer and we have the amount in brackets afterwards. Okay, so you can add costs at point of adding them as well. I'm going to add one more resource. So we're going to go to the Select and Buy Rings task. I'm going to right click and select Assign Resources. And you've probably guessed what we're going to do here. We are going to assign the wedding rings. Now with this one, I'm going to do it slightly differently. There are 2 wedding rings. So in units, I'm going to say 2 and click Assign. And you can see there it's picked up from the resource sheet the cost of the wedding ring, which is $500 each. And the Gantt chart has updated with wedding rings and then 2 in brackets. What I also might want to do here is because both the bride and groom are going to be assigned to this task, I may want to assign them as well. So I can go back in, select the bride, assign, select the groom, assign, close. And now I have multiple resources assigned to that particular task. Okay, so hopefully that shows you how you can set up a resource sheet and how you can assign those resources to different parts of your project. Now, something else I want to talk about is separating tasks into different phases. So as I mentioned before, we need to set the wedding date, and the wedding date relies on all of the tasks before it being completed. So down here we have our wedding day currently October the 21st. Now, the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to separate out task 42 and task 43. So the rehearsal and the wedding day, I'm going to separate out and put them at the bottom because these are the 2 things that are going to come right at the end of the project. And literally everything else in the project needs to be done before we go for the rehearsal and before we have the wedding day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste these 2 tasks from here just to underneath the rest of our tasks. Now, one thing that's really important to know is if you start copying and pasting tasks is that you need to make sure that those tasks are outdented first. Okay, so I'm going to select them. I'm going to go to the task ribbon and I'm going to use my outdent button to outdent them. Okay, so then I can do a Control X to cut them, and I'm going to paste them down here. Control, oops. Let me try that again. Control V. No, let's back. What did I do wrong here? Let me try that again. That should work. I did outdent them enough, didn't I? Let's try that again. Yep, they can't be outdented any further. Let's try Control X. There we go. I think I was clicked in the wrong place. So we can just paste those in down at the bottom. And what I essentially want to do, or what I'm trying to achieve here, is I want to say that basically everything else needs to be done before these 2 tasks can go ahead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll up to the top of the schedule. And I'm going to go to this attire task. Oops, let me select it. And I'm going to insert another task. So I'm going to right click and select insert task, which will give me a new task just above attire. And I'm going to rename this task, or I'm going to give it a name of preparation phase. And you could split your project up into as many phases as you like. We're just going to do one so you get the kind of idea. And there we go. We have preparation phase at the top here. And what I'm basically going to do is make everything that comes below it part of this preparation phase. So I'm going to highlight all of the tasks below, except those bottom two. And I'm going to use my indent key and I'm going to indent those tasks. So they now become subtasks of the preparation phase. So essentially what I can do is I can use the little arrow here and collapse up that preparation phase if I want to. And then what I can do is at the bottom here is I can say that these two tasks rely on the entire preparation phase, so task 6. So I can come down here and I can add into here rehearsal relies on task 6 and also wedding day relies on task 6 as well. Okay, so you can add those in like that. So you might want to think about when you're looking at your project, separating it into preparation phase, all the different kinds of phases, and then linking to that particular phase for the things that need to come right at the end. Okay, so what I'm trying to get across to you here is you really need to think about how you're going to structure your project in a way that makes it really efficient when you're working within project as well. All right, we've got about 6 minutes left and I have a couple more things that I want to show you. Now for this, I'm going to close down this file. So I'm going to click on close and I'm not going to save the changes. And I have another file open behind it. So this is really a progression of the file we were just looking at. So there's a couple of differences here. I've been through and I've filled out a few more of these dates. And you'll also see that I've added a lot more resources to this particular project. Now I'm going to jump straight across to the resource sheet. So remember again, the last icon here in the status bar says resource sheet. And you can see I've added a whole host of different resources. So I think we got up to photographer in our last example. I've added the rest of these in. I've set up a lot of these as costs to the project. And you can also see that a lot of these, the accrual is set to end. So we won't be paying until the end. So the interesting thing about accruing at the end is that because this payment will be incurred at the end, it means that they're assigned to tasks which would accrue at the end. So what I mean by that is if we jump back to our Gantt chart, and if we go down to something like this one, let's say this one here, reception venue, or sorry, book reception venue. If you look at the Gantt chart, you can see there, that is where we have the cost assigned. So it says $6,600. So that cost resource has been assigned to book reception venue. It hasn't been assigned to reception venue booked. Okay, so again, you need to make sure which tasks you're assigning your cost resources to make sure that you assign them to the right one when that cost is actually going to be incurred. And because I've set that resource up as accrue at the end, it's going to be charged once we've booked the reception venue. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. I know sometimes it's a little bit difficult to understand what's going on there. Now, another thing you might want to do, or another column that's quite useful to add into your spreadsheet, particularly when you start dealing or adding cost resources into your project, is to add another column for cost. So if I click this column here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to right click and we're going to select insert column. And again, from here, I'm looking for cost, and these are in alphabetical order. So I'm going to scroll through and we're going to select cost. And this will give you an idea of the overall costs of your project. So I can see currently the overall cost is somewhere in the region of about $30,000. And I can see the rest of the costs for each stage or each task on my project. So that is sometimes a really useful thing to add in to your project plan. Now, there is another way that you can view different costs, and that is to go into the project tab. And if you go into project information, you have a statistics button at the bottom here. So if you don't want that cost column in there and you just want to have a quick glimpse as to where you're at, you can jump into here, click on statistics, and that will show you the current costs on your project. All right. Now, just to finish up, because we've got about 2 minutes left to go, I just want to talk to you briefly about setting up baselines. Now, baselines are a snapshot of a project at a particular point in time. So as I said, I've filled this project out quite a bit. I've filled in a lot of the dates. I've got a lot of the costs and resources in there. So I might look at this project as it currently is and say, okay, I'm fairly happy with how this looks. This is how I'm going to proceed. This is what I intend to do. So I might want to take this point in the project as the baseline. And then I'll measure any further any further progress in this project against that baseline. And you may want to have multiple different baselines throughout the life cycle of your project. So I might want to take this as a snapshot or a baseline. And then as the project progresses, in a couple of months, I might decide to take another baseline and measure progress from there. There's up to 11 different baselines that you can add. And we're just going to add one because it is very easy to add them. Now, one thing I will show you is if we click on the View tab and go to this Tables drop down, we have a More Tables option in here. And I want to switch to this Baseline option. I'm going to click Apply. And you don't have to switch into this, but I just want to show you this is a different way of viewing it in relation to any baselines that you have set. Now, because I haven't set a baseline or taken a snapshot of the project currently, all of these totals are currently 0. Now, you'll see that when I set the baseline, when it takes the snapshot of the project as it is now, a lot of these fields are going to populate. Okay, so let's go up to the Project tab. And you can see in the schedule group, we have a set baseline option. So I'm going to select set baseline. And as I said before, you can have lots of different baselines. So you can see here, there's 11 of them that you can have. So I can set up a baseline. I normally just select the first available one, like so. I want it to do a baseline or set a baseline for the entire project. And I'm going to click on OK. And notice when I do that, it's going to populate all of these fields with the current figures of my project. So if I click on OK, there we go. All of these have been populated. So that's my current baseline. I could then go and carry on working on my project. And then in 2 months' time, I could go and set another baseline. And if I come up to here and set another one, you can see that's my current baseline. It says last saved November the 21st. I could go in, I could select the next one and set my next baseline if I wanted to. So you can do it throughout the life cycle of your project. Now, baselines are really useful to track progress on a project. Now, that's not something we're going to go into here, but it is something that I would say is good for you to have a little read into. And just to finish up, I have kind of put onto a slide just some things that I think would be good further reading. So again, look at more at setting up costs, tracking progress on a project, and also setting up calendars. We haven't spoken a lot about calendars because it is such a big topic, but it's definitely very important and something you should look into. And also reporting, particularly if you find yourself having to report progress on projects back to managers and key stakeholders. So those would be my 4 main things that I would read about after these 2 sessions. As I said, this project or this subject is so huge. There's so much that we could talk about. I would recommend that if you do have to use project, really go through our beginners course that you have access to and our advanced course. They go into everything that I've gone through in much greater detail. And the exercises that I've shown you or the demonstration files have come straight out of our Project 2016 course. So you have all the videos there. It will go through everything in a lot more detail than I have, and it will really help you move your knowledge with regards to project on greatly. Whew, that is it. That is all we have time for today. So I'll hand back to Adam and I'll just open it up to any questions if he has them, if he can feed them through to me. That would be great.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me all right, Debs?
I can, yes.
Fantastic. Hi, everybody. Yeah, a couple of questions that have come in. I think you may have partially answered some of them, but on one of the earlier on you were showing us about constraints.
Yes.
Tahir asked, how can we present constraints to management during a project meeting in the absence of Microsoft Project software. So I think basically a way to report on or show constraints or what constraints there are in a project to stakeholders without actually having to give them Microsoft Project, because understandably not everyone's got access to that.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
Is there a report? I was thinking is probably the
a report for constraints.
Or are constraints shown on one of the reports, or is it a bespoke report?
To be honest with you, I haven't been through every single one of these reports, so I couldn't say with any great confidence that it doesn't appear on any report. But if we have a quick look through, let's have a look through. I don't think there is a milestone report, so you could show milestones. But as for constraints, I'm not sure there is. I mean, you could probably create, this is where you go into kind of report creation. So you can create your own reports. You could go into a blank report and you could set up exactly what it is that you want to add. So there's might be an option in there for showing the constraints on in report form, essentially. The only other thing I might suggest, if they don't have Project on their PC, I mean, if you've got access to Office 365, I think you could still view Project through there. You could still view the project file, so that would mean they don't have to have Project on their PC. It depends if you've got Office 365 or not. If anybody else on the call has any other ideas as to how they might do that, I'd be open to hearing about those. Those are the two things I can think about off the top of my head if they don't have Project.
Yeah, I guess you could assign milestones to once certain constraints have been met or something like that, and then
you could do that
way.
Yeah.
Cool. So another one, and I think you may have sort of answered this, but question from Mila is in assign resources. How do you assign a contractor who has an hourly rate?
Yep. So if we to go into here, so if say the bride was a contractor, let's go into here. So you could, I believe you could add in, I think you can add in an hourly rate column. These are standard rate columns that we have in here, but I'm pretty sure that you can add in, there's probably a standard hourly rate column in here somewhere. Let's have a look, see if I can see it off the top of my head. There's so many of these, it makes my eyes
it's a mind-boggling large number of options, aren't there?
There's probably going to be some kind of hourly rate in here that you could use. I can't see one off the top of my head. Let's see, is it one of these? No, I can't. I mean, there's so many of them, it's making my eyes go cross. But there's probably an hourly rate or something like that in there. I might have to have a quick Google of that. I think possibly it's got hour there. So you could just add in the hourly rate. So you see it's got per hour. So you could add in hourly rate in this way.
Oh, yeah. It's already
standard rate column. It's already in there.
Yeah, of course. So I think you can either set that as a normal or hour.
So this would be your standard. I mean, so it's got HR in there, so hourly rate. If it's this cost used column would be if it's more like a fixed cost. So something like a wedding ring has a fixed cost of $500. That would be this cost per use.
Got you.
But this one here, I didn't see that first of all, but it's got hourly rate in there.
So it's already in there. I was looking for it.
Great. Scrolling through, going on cross-eyed.
Thank you for that question. One more from Robert. How do we assign tasks to people and have them update their progress? Which I think is a pretty handy one.
Sorry, say that again. How do you assign?
How do we assign tasks to different people and have them update their progress? So working with others. I guess assigning people as resources and then having them update their progress. Is that possible in Project?
Let me go to here. So
the type of thing that you get in tools like Monday and Jira and those kind of project management tools.
So you're talking about, so say for example, we've assigned this task to the bride, and then if the bride completes some of the work, how do you update that on the project plan? Is that what you're saying?
How would she update that? Yeah.
How would she update that? Well, I'm going to assume that you're probably sharing this project plan so she can jump into project and update how much percentage of work that's been completed on this task. So you can see here in the schedule group, you see you've got 0%, 25%, 50%, 75%, so on and so forth. So you could update how much work you've done on a particular task for that particular resource, but it would rely on everybody having access to this project.
Yeah, and actually that's one of the things, and this is where sort of Microsoft have been advancing project. What we're working on here is a desktop version of project. There is, or Microsoft have very recently released, like in the last few weeks, an updated version of Project Online, which is effectively going to compete with the likes of, all the various kind of project management online softwares that are doing very well at the moment. So I think that's the kind of thing that Microsoft are moving towards to make will make a lot simpler with that online thing, and you pay kind of like a small amount per month per user, like you do with Jira or Monday or any of those kind of tools. And we are planning on putting a course together on that in the new year. It's on our list of courses to do. So yeah, that's our kind of that's our thing. And then I think to answer your question, how to update it without Microsoft project software, I don't think external people can go in and then update a project without access to Microsoft project. Would I be right in thinking that, Debs?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if you can access it if you've got Office 365. I can't remember if this is
part of like the online stuff that they're moving towards. So yeah, and it's sort of so Robert's asking if we share access to project people using online, can we set permissions? Yeah, possibly. I think you definitely you can, Robert. And unfortunately, we're in the desktop version here rather than the online version. But we will be hopefully putting a course together on that, because I think that's probably the one thing where the kind of desktop version of project is, or the traditional versions of project are missing, is that team interactive element.
Project's always been that kind of weird application. It's sort of never included as part of the Microsoft suite. So it's always like kind of that thing you've always had to buy in addition to everything else. But it looks like now sort of the way they're going, they're moving it into their online packages. So that's going to be a lot better for everybody. But yeah, at the moment, the one that we're using is the desktop version. And I'm actually using the 2019 version, which is basically the same as 2016. But yes.
Mila mentioned that she thinks you can via SharePoint, and I think I've seen companies that have used that in the past. You can sort of upload in the same way that you used to be able to, you upload your sort of saved file to SharePoint, and then someone else can basically sort of download and work on it in their version and re-upload it, all that kind of stuff. But so in terms of functions, Robert, I'm not sure yet. We need to get to it. We've not worked in online project much. But yeah, we'll be looking at that. Be looking at that in the new year. That should be good. All right. Thank you, everybody. I don't think there are any more questions. There are a couple of people asking about PMP stuff, and that's probably from one of our partners, Exams PM. We don't actually have any PMP training ourselves because we just focus on IT and software tools. So Exams PM is the .com is the website you need if you're looking at PMP training. It's run by someone called Helena. She's incredibly knowledgeable on project management and PMP and helping people pass those exams. She's fantastic. So I would definitely recommend that. And then, as Deb said, make sure you go and take the project courses, because what we've covered in these last two sessions is maybe less than 20% of the beginner's course. Almost.
Way less. Yeah.
There's loads of stuff in there.
It's a very hard application just to train for an hour, because there's so much to it that you really need to get into all the detail.
Losing you a little bit as I was going through that, just because I was like, it's so dense, and there's so many different sort of things that you almost need to and that's what we do in the courses. We run a project alongside it, like a wedding project. So I think that's the best way to learn project. Basically, have a project and start using it like that, because I think that works really well. Notes here. We don't have any more project webinars planned right now. What we're going to do in the new year is we're going to do a couple of Excel webinars and a PowerPoint webinar as well. So that's what we've got planned. We're having December off, mostly because A, it's Christmas, and B, Debs is going on holiday for a few weeks, so she's not really around. But we'll be back in January with more live sessions. Robert, how many hours is the full course? I think the regular one is about 9 hours, the beginner course, and then the advanced one is also about 9 hours. So you're getting it's close to 20 hours in total of training. So it is, like I say, it's a very there's a lot to learn in project. And the advanced course goes into stuff like managing multiple projects, multiple projects feeding into one master project, and all that kind of stuff. So we go up to that kind of level. Lots of detail on that. With the full, is there a way to ask questions? Yeah, there is, Robert. I mean, we can, we do handle questions as they come in via our support. So if you're a member, then you can email us questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. And if we don't know the answer, then often we'll reach out to Debs. We don't offer sort of bespoke kind of consulting support, but we do offer support in terms of the learning if there's something that you can't quite get your head around. Great, thank you everybody. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks,
Debs,
everyone.
thank you for holding that. Well, we won't see everybody, so have a great Thanksgiving to everybody in the US. That's coming up soon. Have a fantastic Christmas as well, which I'm just a bit hard saying that in November. But anyway, a fantastic Christmas for everyone, sort of celebrating that in the next month or so. And we'll be back in the new year with more with more training. Excel and PowerPoint. I think are we going to do logical functions, Debs? I think it's one.
I think so. Yes.
And then
my favourite.
Yes, and I think we're also going to do one on Power Pivot, which is one of my favourites, which is awesome. It's like pivot tables on steroids and Red Bull. It's fantastic. So if you want to get into data analysis and logical functions next year, that's what we'll be hitting up.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Cool. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.